Good morning, friends and viewers of this meeting of Baroda Book Browsers. Matter of delight once again to welcome you all to this our virtual meeting format. Before we begin the proceedings, let me wish you a very safe and very careful living in your respective homes and workspaces, along with your friends and relatives, because we are all in the midst of a very uncertain time with regard to our individual health, which is caused by this COVID-19 pandemic since the beginning of 2020. Uh, you may find my next few sentences a little bit dispiriting, but I must do that for the benefit of all of us. Uh, it's not to create any panic, but I was reading the recent report of NIHR of UK, and that report has some findings and messages to the public, which are, I won't say if not worrisome, they are certainly concerning. What it says is that this pandemic is not confined to, to most visible or palpable physiological aspect, namely heart and the respiratory system. What it does that, it stays once you are infected as a long haul. And in that long haul period, it has the likelihood of penetrating through damaging your arteries, cells, and affecting your oxygen saturation to other organs of the body. So now that the second wave of pandemic having already begun in Europe, as reports are coming from many countries there, and India continues to be in community transmission stage, it's all the more critical that we have to maintain vigil on an ongoing basis. Uh, with this initial remark, now let me turn on to the meeting of the day. Well, this book, as you already know, titled "Finding Our Way: Leadership for an Uncertain Time." Though this book was written some 15 years back, as Kalpana told me, uh, it has had some uncanny, eerie feeling about the uncertain times that are going to hit the world in the coming decades. And here we are, whether it is on geopolitical front or public health front, we are in the midst of very, very uncertain times. So in that context, this book assumes a little extra connectivity and importance. Uh, the main theme of the book is, finding our way in three sub-themes, as the author has, divided the chapters. The author, drawing upon her own experience as a very foremost management consultant for 4 decades, she finds that rather than having a mechanistic view or a monochronic look at the life in a very formal way, which every professional tends to do. Kalpana, let me tell you, every professional tends to do that. This particular management consultant brings to bear her experiences as a foremost consultant. And then, she switches over to storytelling. In fact, storytelling is not a very difficult proposition for most management consultants because that's what they do, day in and day out for earning their living. So in her, this storytelling, she has divided into 3 aspects, mainly. She begins with what it takes to organizing more effectively and improving the potential of the people. Then she also gives very useful tips with lots of anecdotes on what it takes for the leadership, to increase the potential of not only the effectiveness of the leadership, but also of the people whom they are supposed to lead. And then finally, she also talks about the obstacles on the way, what kind of barriers you have to confront, and offering some tips and clues how to overcome them. So that's how this book has been subdivided. And about the author, I will leave it to Kalpana to talk while presenting this book review. But let me also talk about Kalpana. Kalpana is a doctorate in psychology. She is a member of Baroda Book Browser for almost a decade, and she began reviewing a book, I think, sometime in 2012. Since then, she has reviewed 5 books, and some very fascinating books she has reviewed, like Flow, Poor Economics, Learned Optimism, Factfulness, and Ikigai. She is a practicing corporate management consultant herself, having lots of assignments on her hand and loads of experience she brings along with that. So that's Kalpana. And Kalpana, thank you for accepting to review a book at Baroda Book Browser Forum. And without further ado, now let me hand over the floor. And I invite Kalpana to come to the floor and please take forward your presentation. Over to Kalpana. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. Am I audible?
You are audible to me. I suppose you, because
Okay.
the audience will not be able to respond because
Right.
this
Right.
is
Because
large.
there was some challenge on the screen, so I thought I'll just check
No,
whether
thank
I'm
you.
able to get through.
Yeah. As is the trend these days, it's monologue. One
Yeah.
Yes, Sambhavi. I think so. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I'll try to get in. I had disabled the.
Good morning.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, sir. As the title of the book says, finding our way in uncertain times. So times are uncertain and things don't happen as we predict them to, right? So even with this particular book review, it happened that I've been online last 15 minutes, but just at the time of the review, it can happen that I lose my connection. And yeah, looks like in spite of having 2, 3 connections, sometimes it just happens. It's not our day. So coming quickly to the topic of the day and this particular book, I thank Sunil Bhai for inviting me for this particular book review. With Sunil Bhai, it has always been, and with Baroda Book Browsers, that whatever I need to study, I am asked to review. Somewhere or the other, whichever it can be called, some connection. But when I started my PhD and I was to do it in positive psychology, I had reviewed the book Flow. And at some point in time, luckily, I got to meet also Dr. Ziggs and Mihai. So with BBB and with Sunil Bhai, it is really like that. That whatever he recommends or he shares somehow helps me in my later time. So this particular book that I want to talk about is called Finding Our Way, and I'm going to share the media. And as you can see from the cover page, it is a journey by the leaders. And since I know the group here, I know most of you are leaders. And how do we manage in these uncertain times? Like Sunil Bhai said, the book is written, although in 2004, published in 2004. And at that time, the uncertain times that she was talking about was probably 9/11 or the change of Y2K. But in spite of that, whatever she has written, that kind of, I'm getting this thing that audio is missing.
That's okay. Please carry on.
Is it audible?
Yes, yes. Please go ahead.
Okay.
You carry
Thank you,
on.
Chirag bhai. Okay, sir. So, the book, in connecting it to 15 years gap, it doesn't feel that there is a 15-year gap. So it is by Margaret Wheatley, or Meg Wheatley as she's called regularly. She's an organizational consultant with more than 40 years of experience. She is running an institute called as Barkana Institute, and very recently she received the second annual Clara Snell Woodbury Distinguished Women's Leadership Award. And she came into limelight under the Clinton administration. But before that also, she has been known as a very go-to person related to management consultancy. Probably when she started a consultancy, I was barely in school. So that many years of experience. Broadly, the book has been divided into 4 to 5 themes or sections, and she talks about how she got inspiration to write this book. And she very clearly mentions that the essays that are written in this book are her thought process till the time the book gets published. Okay, so there is no promise that this will remain. It will grow, it will develop. And I looked up their website, and yes, she has continued and on this particular thing. So her opening is on ancient Thera. It's a set of islands in Greece, and it is representative of a particular kind of culture called as a Minoan culture, which is represented by our this kind of work. So if there is an artist here or a design person, they would know what a Minoan culture is. But here is a management consultant who's talking about the Minoan culture. And how did it inspire her? And that's what she says about the ancient new story. She's talking about new story. I'll come to that. Why is it called new? But why is it also ancient at the same time? And that is because of the roots of the early civilizations where the concept was with a deep harmony with life, a joyous celebration of life. So images are like this, the dolphins dancing, women in colorful clothes, particularly the deep blue that you see. That's very typical of the Minoan culture. So the ancient new story that she's going to talk to us about is what she's recommending. And because this book is in a way poetic, in a way philosophical, I'm going to read out a little, as little as possible, of course. But there are certain things which the beauty, the words that the author has used, which I cannot replicate. So I would rather read. So the ancient new story she's talking about, she's saying life is a cycle. It's not always going up and up and up. So why this story? The story is because, I'm reading now, the certainty of cycles, the triumph of order over chaos, the diversity born from life's creativity, the innate artistry of each of us, the enduring beauty of the human spirit. These are what I write about. From Minoan times till now, the story hasn't changed. But it is important that we reclaim it and retell it before we are swept away by eruptions of our own making. So she is inviting all of us, the readers, the leaders who are listening here, that we reclaim this story. It is as old as mankind, and retell it. And there is a hidden, I would not say a threat, but a warning before we are swept away by eruptions of our own making. So this is the background behind her thought process. So she says that although Thera is an ancient place to visit, it's a modern teacher, and the themes that she has picked up. First one is related to organizations, probably because she's an organizational consultant or because she has worked with so many organizations. So the organizing, there's a simpler way, is the first theme. The second one is leadership. In these uncertain times, we make the road by walking. There is no predefined road for us. We have to create that road by ourselves. Then there are obstacles where the road gets hard. It's not going to be an easy walk. And then she looks back to what have been her footsteps. She shares some anecdotes about her own footsteps. So that's broadly about the structure of the book. When she's talking about organizing and there being a simple way, let me also, as an aside, tell you that she identifies with a lot with Buddhism. And this is Pema Chodron. an American Buddhist nun, and the person with whom she has identified, because this book is actually a compilation of her essays over a 10-year period across these four themes. So she starts with the fact that, and if you read it now, it applies so much in the current situation too. The whole globe is so shook up. So what are you going to do when things are falling apart? You're either going to become more fundamentalist and try to hold the things together, or you're going to forsake the old ambitions and goals and live life as an experiment, making it up as you go along. So the Buddhist way of life, thought process, is accepting life, living life as we go along. And she puts up this question that Pema has put in as to what will we do now with the changes that we are seeing so very largely around all of us. And this is where that eerie feeling creeps in. What we have done as humankind is that last 300 years, we have always thought of organization as something which has to be controlled, something which has to be taken care of. But if there are challenges, then what do we look at? We look at quick technical solutions. Even if the technology was the earlier problem. Isn't it contradictory? Technology created problems, but then we are looking at technology for solutions. But we do not realize that the paradigm from which we are looking at, and she is questioning us, this paradigm that we have looked at. So the challenge is that people never behave like machines. We have a reorganization, a re-engineering effort. We may also have, an OD effort once in a while. But sadly, the planning that we do as management consultant, as leadership, people don't behave like machines for us. So from this earlier, our viewpoint of people, we need to move to this kind of vibrant look at human beings. So she talks about a poem by Allen. It says, don't establish boundaries first. What we tend to do the moment we think of organization, we think of organization chart. That will come later. But the poem talks to her, and she has included a lot of these poems or even made up poems. In fact, there is a whole chapter devoted to T.S. Eliot. So don't establish the boundaries first. The squares, triangles, boxes of preconceived possibility, and then pour your life into them. Trimming off leftover edges, because that's where the edges contain the potential, so ending potential when we trim it over. Instead, dead centers proliferate from self-justifying motions. So Adams was a poet who she has referred to here. So this new story, as she's talking about, it is a tale of life which allows for creative self-expression. It allows for relationships, although systems, but they are relationships. So there is an invitation to a new storyteller amongst us to ignite the transformation of humanity. And how will we do that? That is first by looking at the paradigm that we hold of human beings. She's talking about thinking of universe as a huge machine And then from that to human being as a machine, and we look at our bodies also as machines. And assumption that we have made that organizations are also machines to produce whatever is the output that we require. So do we want to look at the future of organizing as a machine, or this is what a typical organogram looks like? So is it as a machine that we are looking at? But we realize that the more, even if you make those changes in the organogram, you give less powers or, demote somebody, but the person still holds the informal power that you were trying to cut off. So really, are they really machines? Doesn't look like. Organizations are living systems made up of living human beings. And the layer of the living system is that it has a capacity to self-organize. It has a capacity to self-organize into a different shape, as I tried to show here, that although the external looks the same, it has changed. And the examples that she shares are related to the very first few hours after any disaster. That's the time when people come together. People organize themselves at different times. And I remember a friend of mine, very recently the cyclone Amphan affected Kolkata. He was in Kolkata at that time, and I was he's a classmate. I got a little concerned, and I called him after a few days because for quite a few days there was no connectivity. So I asked Sudeep, I said, how did it go? So his response was, Kalpana, yeah, I've never seen such fury of the nature outside. We were all scared, very scared. But as soon as the cyclone passed over, I suddenly felt a lot of hope. So I was wondering, was it related to Mamta Didi? Was it related to the political? And he would now rant and rave. He said, I got a big ray of hope from all the youngsters around us. They got together. There were huge trees which have fallen in our area. And these trees are maybe 50 years, 100 years older. And I was feeling extremely bad that such a large tree, living system has fallen. But here were youngsters who were coming up and telling us, okay, uncle, let us see how to do this. You help us, you hold on. So he said, I just supported them, but it was they themselves who started, did not wait for any official machinery to reach us. They started trying, they looked up the internet, started trying and working on how to save these trees. Because the moment the municipality would come, they would just come, cut the tree, make the road, open the road, right? So she's talking about these first few hours after any disaster. There was a very beautiful case study done after 9/11 also, where relate after the 9/11, after 9/11, what were some of the things that were that helped people? Another was related to our very own Taj attack. When Ratan Tata, in a case study, it's a beautiful online talk by Dr. Deshpande from Harvard. If you find time, please look it up. They asked Ratan Tata that how did the Taj employees rally through that attack, because they had 600 employees on the board. They knew every nook and cranny to run away from, but not a single person did. In fact, many died while trying to save the Atithi in their homes, right? So they asked Ratan Tata as to what do you do to create such kind of commitment? He said, I don't do anything. There was no SOP telling them what to do in such an emergency because such an emergency was never envisaged. But yes, there was a feeling that this is ours and we have to save the guests. They could have run away, they did not. So, organizations are living systems who reorganize when required. That's what we as leaders want, we as consultants want, that people look into the whole system and improve upon it to get better output, to get better results, etc. And examples of it, organizations are living systems, are in communities of practice, WWW, all these, they are showing us the way that given enough independence, they can reorganize for better results. And scientifically also it has been proven. It has been proven by showing order in complex systems. Stuart Kaufman did a light bulb experiment in which there were just two rules that he followed. There were around 200 bulbs, and bulb 21 would be connected to 25, and when 25 goes on, 21 would also go on, and 21 would also be connected to say 35 number, and when 35 switches off, 21 would also switch off. So things like very simple rules. But after maybe 13th or 14th iteration, there became a pulse of lighting and non-lighting of the bulbs. Another example, tower building termites. They do not have a blueprint. They do not, we have them in our projects, right? But I know of many project managers who break their head for the simple fact that the customer has to be delivered what we have promised them. But tower building termites, they do not have a blueprint. They do not have any such complex project management controls, but they do have fantastic towers who meet at the right place with the right arch. So what is required is very first identity. What is my identity as an organization? We cannot direct it, we can only disturb it. So we can only push a little. Information. Because information is the medium that the organization requires. And relationships, the pathways amongst the organization. If we are able to work on these, a lot of things, the system takes care for itself. There was a plant in West Virginia where she has consulted, and it was a very highly safety conscious plan. And they had some 83 recordable injuries to none. That's what they had moved from within a few months after her intervention. That what will happen if there was a small incident, because it was a highly sensitive plant. So when there were some minor incidents, did the organization add more controls? Did they add more rules? Instead, what they did was they looked at these three: identity, information, and relationships. And they tweaked because there were some changes. Do we still have the same relationship with each other? Did everyone still have access to the information that was required? And did they really believe in the principles that the plant was living for? And that's what brought in that earlier challenge of no injuries, zero injuries, right? So it is possible to have order in complex systems, provided we are able to manage identity, information, and relationships. But for that, as leaders, We have to chart out a different road, and the road is our footsteps, nothing else. It's a new road that we are carving out, this new story that she has been talking about, for which we require community, we require self-determination by the community, and need from the community. There are so many readings that I would like to do as I'm marked here, but then I may not finish in the given time, so I'm going to skip that. But basically, even within the community, a shared sense of purpose. Like, for example, why do we come together at BBB? What makes you sacrifice that 1 hour of a Sunday morning to BBB? Sometimes 1.5 when we had our face-to-face meetings. You know, the purpose is sharing. The purpose is books. The purpose is common love for reading and getting knowledge. I think that is the shared purpose that we all have, which brings us to this community called as Baroda Book Browsers. And for this, we need to rely on goodness of human beings. Although sometimes it looks little difficult to believe in, but she is quoting another poet, Roger Rosenblatt, the best in art and life. The best in art and life comes from a center, something urgent and powerful, an idea or an emotion that insists on its being. From that insistence, a shape emerges and creates a structure out of passion. If we begin with a structure, we have to make up the passion, and that is very hard to do. So it is important that we work on structuring the passion in the first place, the purpose for the community, for the organization. Then comes the theme of leadership. We make the road by walking. These essays are focused on leadership, where she's again talking about goodbye to command and control. Basically, we come, you know, a lot of our leadership or our control systems have come from the military. And she had also worked with the military for some time. In fact, she shares an example where she was wearing night vision goggles with a pilot, and they were on kind of on a path in the air, and the soldier, the person who was bombing or was wanting to bomb, was looking at what will be the destruction that will be looked at. But she looked up into the sky using the night vision goggles, and she looked at the beauty of the sky. So we have to give goodbye to this command and control. And we need to bring in coherence. We need to take action, of course, but no quick fixes. So it is always a personal journey for the leader also to build enduring organizations. Whenever I have been in consulting and the leader has said that this is the problem, my people are like this is the challenge with my organization. As a psychologist, many times I find that the change has to be within the leader first. And then the reorganization, the rearrangement of the system happens. So we need to rely on everyone's creativity. It is not just the leader who is at the center. So diversity has to be paid attention to, and expect to be surprised by people's contributions. That's what she's talking about. When we bring in change, most of the times it is directed by the leader, that is the time when we look at what all rules and regulations should be changed to bring in. But what she's connecting to is she's saying create better health in a living system, connect it more to itself. I'll just share it with an example. Sometimes these words look very esoteric, they look very abstract. So I've tried to extract examples. Now, this is an example about a junior high school principal. If you would know about junior high, which handle teenagers, if most, in fact, it's a rule now that in US, in a high school, you always have permanently a nurse and a policeman stationed. We have still not reached that stage, but you always have a police there present, because what if something goes wrong? So it's such a junior high school principle who created a complex and orderly system from a few principles to it's worth looking at. Most school administrators fear adolescents, and the typical junior high school has unending rules and procedures to police the hormone-crazed tendencies of early teens. But this junior high school of 800 students successfully operated from three rules. Just three rules they had to have. Students, teachers, and staff, all of them. These three were all that were needed. First, take care of yourself. Second, take care of each other. And third, take care of this place. We would not believe that such a simple rule, you could create an orderly group of adolescents, let alone a good learning environment from such simple rules. But somewhere in the later stage, she says, what happens when this school faces a challenge? So these kind of principles, not models which are defined by us as leaders, but some basic principles are important. Then each of us has to conduct experiments and trust that the life will organize itself. But there are places where change is out of our control. We are not able to control these changes. What is it that the leaders have to do? And she says that in such times, leadership is more of spiritual. Life is uncertain. It is not always in the growth phase. It's cyclical. So, stock market will never always go up. It has to come down at some time. So in the same way, what motivates people in such turbulent times, that is meaning. And we saw it in the lockdown also. We went back to our basics. What was meaningful to us, we did. And that is what service people also tell us. People whom we have been thanking, a lot of them, the last man on the road, the cleaner on the road, when you thank him, he says, this is the service that brings us joy. Some meaning has been found for my work. And we have to rely on human goodness to be able to manage these turbulent times. She has a set of advices for the leaders also. They are like a prescription, but she talks about start the day peacefully. Learn to be mindful. Here is the Buddhist influence on her. Slow things down. Very similar to the Ikigai that we looked at. Create your personal measures. Don't expect that everything will happen as you plan it to be. Expect surprises and practice gratefulness. Although we have been taught this, we've been told to say thank you at the end of the meal, at the end of the day, but really do we take time to count our blessings? We rarely do. So sometimes when whatever has been taught to us, we don't learn, so life teaches us. So she says, I believe that because you're human, you've already experienced the powers, fears, and joys that I have described. It is more important to access your own wisdom than to seek advice from anyone else. Life is a consistent teacher. It always teaches the same lessons. Change is just the way it is. Peace is not dependent on circumstances. We are motivated by meaning. We want to express our love through service. And when we believe that, as leaders, we are playing our part in something more purposeful than our own small egos can explain, we become leaders who are peaceful, courageous, and wise. So, leadership has to learn its own spiritual lessons. Now, while we are doing this, there will be a number of obstacles, like knowledge management. What do we do to manage these obstacles? We will take up things which will help us in managing these, right? So one of them is knowledge management. Knowledge has been created by human beings. It is natural for people to create and share knowledge, but the person has to know the purpose, why he is doing what he is doing. Everybody is a knowledge worker. She shares a beautiful example of a bus driver who was trying to explain to a new entrant how it means to drive a bus for a particular school. Now we may think, what is there? It's only driving, right? But the tips that she was giving to this new bus driver showed to the author that each of us is a knowledge worker. And it was not compulsory for the bus driver to share, but people choose to share their knowledge when they find the right person. So it's not about technology, it's about willingness to share. And also, knowledge is born under chaotic circumstances. So at that time, am I documenting it? Am I realizing that knowledge is being born? So what leaders need to do is self-awareness and reflection. As leaders, many a times the obstacle is in measurement, but are we measuring criteria which are externally imposed, or are we looking at feedback? Because here in feedback, the system chooses what to notice, what not. So it is self-determined. That's why she says, name the leaders, connect them, nourish them, and illuminate them, and support these pioneering leaders. And here is where she's talking about her own movement of supporting women leaders worldwide through the Barkana Institute. Sometimes we do face aggression, but that's where we can turn it into creativity. So she's talking about a method of cooling the person first, enriching them, magnetizing, destroying the wrong paradigms, and then acting based on the new paradigm. So how do you transfer aggression into creativity? At the same time, each of us has to attend to our own footsteps. What have we done before? How our behavior has been affected by the times. And when we see an unfair thing happening, whether we respond with courage or with silence. There was a very, very beautiful example given in a recent Reader's Digest where they see a roadside dhaba server being abused by a drunk customer. The author says, I remained silent because it was not my business, but somebody stepped in for that young child. And that's where, as leaders, we can pay attention to what has been our way of working. Has it been showing courage or being silent in face of challenges? And this affects our children. Here in this book, she's talking about the Truth Commission which came up in South Africa. and a white man is questioned by his child because there were many atrocities committed on the black. And the child comes back to this white man and says, how could you allow this to happen in our own country? How come you did not know about it? So how does it affect our children when they look at us? So look back to our own footsteps, for which we need to look at the world as an interconnected being. And we see it happening. And this is where again that eerie feeling came in. Living with our interconnectedness. You know, a SARS happening somewhere else did not bother me so much, except residents of Kerala. But today, when COVID happening somewhere affected me, and we are all sitting where we are living our interconnectedness. Where even if we did not realize it, life taught us. And are we willing to be disturbed by that? Are we thinking over? Are we taking the time to think at a personal level? That is what she is recommending about. So, listening, raising our children with that listening power, and ending our silence. She's also sharing her own examples, my own footsteps. So she's talking about how she was with her sons and the challenge that US is facing as a country. So she writes a beautiful letter. I don't have the time to read that, but it's about how hopeful she is that the youngsters will take up the battle. So with that, what my observations have been while reading this book, that it's a philosophical book as well as a poetic. Of course, it's a series of essays. So, you'll find that there is a recurring theme because each essay was an independent article. So there is a recurring theme. Another interesting thing is that author has used her own photographs and poems, including the title, where they take long walks. So it's a sketch from that. But it's not an easy read. It's a complex read, thought-provoking read, no doubt, but it takes little time. And what I realized is, in my case at least, when I was reading this book, there was a movement from concepts. That means it was appealing at the intellectual level. And suddenly, if you noticed, even in my PPT, from concepts, it has become to visuals. And those visuals are invoking some feelings. And at some point, especially when I read her note to the young teenage boys, her own two sons, I was left speechless. I really could not think of anything more than to read it out to my daughter also at a later point in time. So I enjoyed going through this process, although it was not easy. Let me tell you, this book is not a quick read through of say 200, 300 pages, but it's an enjoyable read. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kalpana, for very lucidly explaining a book which is very sound in concepts. Yes. And it requires a bit of deep thinking process and reading with a calm mind to, yes, navigate through the concept to clarity and, the cogent analysis and conclusions which have been, arrived at by the author in those three sub-themes. And thank you also for putting some very nice visuals and your own graphics in the presentations that made it easy to understand a rather complex phenomenon, which is a time-tested something on which, number of SOPs, as they call it,
yeah,
statement of policies are there in place. A lot of management thinkers, practitioners, leaders have been talking about that. But what are the requirements to follow that path, and what are the obstacles which come due to the normal human psychological behavior patterns that have been covered very well by this author with her examples, and you did a brilliant job in conceptualizing and, I would say, cutting to the chase. So thank you indeed, Kalpana, on behalf of everyone at BBB, who is present in this virtual meeting. I really thank you for carrying out wonderful review. And now is the time to take up the questions. And the first question, which I can see in the chat box, coming from my friend in Bengaluru, Shashi. That question is something which I think I have also in mind. He has captured it beautifully. He says SOPs and systems were the mantra for good running of an organization, but in situation like this, I think probably he's referring to the uncertain times. It seems they work contrary to the need. Have the management consultants gone wrong somewhere? And probably, as an extension of his question, can I put, does the author talk about any counterintuitive approach in uncertain times? Kalpana,
Yes.
please respond.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Shashi, sir, thank you. You hit the nail on the head. I think this whole book came out of that turbulence that she experienced, because somewhere she admits in the book that 95% of the change efforts that come in, they are they're failed. They fail because the SOPs are imported from somewhere. So what she says is that the system is so self-organizing, so capable, but we don't look at that system as self-sustaining. What we do is we try and impose something from outside. So if that SOP has been built by the individual, the group, the community, it works, and then wherever in such challenging situations, it will undergo a change. But what will happen is most of the times they have been imported. And consultants like me also do the same thing, right? So we have gone wrong. She says that when you try and import or impose on the system, that means you're denying the value of the system, the life, the life in the system, right? So you're right.
Thank you, Kalpana. This one question is from Sagar Mehta. He's wearing a hat of a management student. A fine
Yeah.
question. And he's asking, we have learned organizational behavior by
Yes.
Kenneth Blanchard,
Right.
that best leadership is situational leadership. Despite
Yes.
whatever he has ingrained in a formal leader of the group,
Hmm.
three there emerges a different leadership based on situation. Does author delve on this aspect?
She's talking about changes in the leadership, but she's not using the model of situational leadership. She is, in fact, against models. She's saying don't have imposed models. Have unique local models which work for that group, that team. So even in the army, if you look at it, all the commanding officers, they become one with, they gel beautifully with their people. And then they learn their language, they learn their ways of living, and then they become leaders. So that's what, in a way, indirectly she's talking about. So she's not used situational leadership in the book at all. In fact, like I said, it's another model given by Blanchard. I also use it. But what we try and do is that tell the leader that look at, be sensitive to the situation. So there she is in sync. Now, how do we look at the situation from the perspective of the follower, from somebody else? That's a different thing.
Right. Thank you, Kalpana. There is another observation in the chat box from Professor
Yes,
Sundarajan,
right.
followed by, of course, seeking your comments. What he observes is that whether it is a profit-driven organization
Or an army contingent. Okay, I'll answer that. I think Sir's connectivity has been lost. In fact, thank you, Professor Sundarajan, for that question, because that helps me connect to one thing which I wanted to read but and had been marked, but I could not. So I'm going to give that answer, my comment as a read from this. Most people associate command and control leadership with the military. Years ago, I worked for the US Chief of Staff, General Gordon Sullivan. I, like most people, thought I would see command and control leadership there. The great irony is that the military learned long ago that if you want to win, you have to engage the intelligence of everyone involved in the battle. What you said about team members. I've heard many military commanders state that if you have to order a soldier to do something, then you failed as a leader. That means a soldier should not be waiting for me to order. The army had a visual reminder of the failure of command and control when years ago they developed the new tanks and armored vehicles that could travel at speeds of 50 miles an hour. During the First Gulf War, there were several instances when troops took off on their own and sped across the desert at this unparalleled speed. However, according to army doctrine, tanks and armored vehicles always had to be accompanied by a third vehicle that is literally called command and control. The vehicle could only travel at 20 miles an hour. So obviously that 20 miles an hour was not useful. So both control and flexibility. Command and control, but that command person also has to grow to that level where they grow, they also are at the same speed. I think Sunil Bhai has lost the connection. I'll handle. Sir is back.
So thank you, Kalpana, for taking over during this.
I answered this question by saying that even military has realized that command and control, where an officer has to command, that means he's really failed as a leader. He has to inspire the foot soldier to take action. So both.
Right. So this one, a comment from our member Ashok. A complex read and difficult to understand the subject requires deep thinking process. Yes, indeed, Ashok Bhai, it is like that.
Difficult.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah.
Going back and forth.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Then Meera comments, a great review as usual. Kalpana, enjoyed listening to it. Will definitely be reading this book. Yes, please do that. Then again, Ashok Bhai is coming back and saying a good meet as usual. Thank you. Sagar Mehta, this time he's not wearing a student's hat, but he's making a comment, a digital stem of rose to speaker Kalpana. Yeah, that's right. A digital stem of rose on behalf of all of us to Kalpana. And before that, I'll take a couple of questions or comments. Surendra Sundararajan comes again with his comment. Leadership implies that one or a few persons will chart a certain direction and venture ahead, while others will follow. So, in purpose driven organizations and teams, discipline is imperative. I think, yeah, it's a very valid observation. Please, Kalpana, if you have any comments to make.
Yeah, it's not that we are not looking at discipline. Like that example of the principal who said three doctrines have to be followed. Look after yourself, look after your look after each other and look after this place. There was a very major storm, and they had to evacuate the school. And when he came back after the storm, he expected that he would be the only one, probably, coming to look at what is the condition of the team, of the school. And believe me, he was faced with 800 pairs of shoes. So discipline, what she's talking about, it's not lack of discipline. It is just that it should not be imposed discipline, forgetting the role of the human being. That is all she's talking about. She's not saying we should, it should be a free world and people can do what. It's not the laissez-faire kind of leadership. Do what you want.
Yeah, and Kalpana, this is the final question and comment from Satya Tiwari. Why leadership in India complain about command and control while the same person the same person behave command and control with his subordinates, meaning
Yes,
thereby that he resents being under command and control of his superior, but when it comes to his subordinates, he exercises the same trait. That's what he means. Do you agree
correct.
with this observation?
Yes,
When we need to follow command and control as a leader.
yeah. It is not an easy task to do, and that's where you feel sandwiched as a leader when you need to give freedom, but you have followed the command and control. That's
Right.
where your resilience comes in.
Very true. So, Kalpana, this is something while noting with thanks and acknowledging your excellent effort today while making a presentation. This is something which is captured in Shashi's these lines, which I wanted also to echo. Reviewing a collection of essays, as this book has been, to drive home the central point is not easy, and yet you have well presented, Kalpana. I think that's how it sums up your excellent
Thank you.
presentation. Thank you very much. It was very, very thought provoking. Your slides were meaningful, and your presentation style, as usual, very lucid and very
Thank you.
calm and cool. Thank you for this
Thank you.
yet another cool review. And on behalf of all of us, I would like to acknowledge, and I would like to wish all the attendees a very nice and satisfying remainder of the Sunday. Thank you for tuning in. And of course, how can I forget Naman Associates and
Yes.
Samir
Thank
and
you, Shambhavi.
Samir and Sambhavi. Sambhavi is a real backbone, of
Yes.
this virtual meetings, and she has been very happily, extending all the cooperation to learners like me, to this platform, very, very patiently and always energetically. Thank you, Sambhavi. I keep appreciating, your help. Thank you so much. Have a
Thank
nice
you.
remainder of the Sunday. Thank you. Until we meet
Thank,
next, stay safe, take care, and all the best. Thank you.
thank you.